Well, as we kick off our final theme this year, we're talking about wonder and observation. I'm wondering, do you collect anything?
I do, but I want to hear what you collect, Holland.
Well, not really anything anymore, but when I was a teenager, I collected coins because I lived abroad. I lived in the Philippines, and there have been so many people who had come through. I mean, it's islands, right? It's right there off China, and there's Indonesia, and the Spanish were there, and the Americans and the British tried to come. The Arab communities made a few efforts to colonize there. The Japanese had come down. So there's just been so many people that have come in that there were lots of coins from different parts of the world and from different eras back into... I know I had some that were dated in the 1700s, and I don't know.
Oh my gosh!
Before that, so I still have several, but not as many as I used to, and they're not organized like they should be. But one of these days.
Okay. Well, whenever I'm asked if I collect anything, I usually say dust because I really that's about what I do well. I collect dust on all horizontal surfaces. But as far as hobbies, I love to be out in the garden. I love to be outdoors. I enjoy reading. And so, you know what, Holland, today I thought we might talk about some birds and the bees.
Yeah, this is supposed to be a family-friendly podcast.
Oh, okay. All right. You're right. We do have to mark clean on our podcast when we publish this. Yep. So actually, what I'm talking about are hobbies and leisure pursuits that are not only fun, but also do good for our communities and the environment.
Hi, I'm Holland Webb.
Hi, I'm Amy Boland.
And you're listening to The Afterword, a conversation about the future of words.
This episode, we are so grateful to have Simon Thompson, who is the owner of Ventures Birding. So welcome, Simon. We're so glad you're here.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Holland. Good to be here.
And joining us at the table is also Kerry Owens from Be Well Honey. So we really are talking about the birds and the bees. Thanks to both of you.
Clarified that because I wouldn't know what to say on the other topics. But thank you for having me here.
Okay, so both of you have interesting personal stories. In just 60 seconds each, would you mind sharing the Cliff Notes version of your life and who you are? We'll start with you, Simon.
Okay, goodness, yes. Well, I currently live in Asheville, North Carolina. I was born and raised in Africa and the Middle East, usually in fairly unstable countries that we had to leave under cover of darkness. My parents are English, but I started watching birds when I was a kid in East and West Africa. I've got a degree in commercial horticulture and have used it very little apart from my gardening. But my hobby, as you would probably say, I'm lucky I've made my hobby and my career very, very linked. And I collect birds. I suppose I should be honest about it. I do collect birds, not in a literary way, but just figuratively. I do collect them in books and lists and things.
Thank you for sharing. I'd love to hear more of those stories about your childhood in Africa and the Middle East, but we'll give Kerry a shot here at the Cliff Notes version of your life.
Well, my hobbies have bounced around a little bit more than Simon's. So I started out as a child in the Cub Scouts and the Boy Scouts. And then my father was a tomato farmer, and eventually he was growing 22 acres of tomatoes. And so for a small family in rural North Carolina, it's called Balsam Grove, which was right under the Blue Ridge Parkway, right near Shining Rock, and the Devil's Courthouse was right under it. The Devil's Courthouse literally was my backyard. And so I loved the woods. I loved the water. Didn't like the tomatoes so much at 14, 15 years old, but I got a football scholarship, and that got me out of some of that tomato field. But my hobbies kind of come from my childhood. I was in rural North Carolina. People made their own butter. had their own cows, grew their own gardens, and we traded stuff, and people would sit on the front porch and break beans. So I was from a farming background, and out of college, I got into TV and radio broadcasting. And then after that, I got into honeybees and started the same process as when I was a child, trading stuff back and forth, and literally ended up with a couple of retail stores where we do that today. I collect honeybees, and I collect any local food from any farmer.
It sounds like who's the A. Milne character that loved honey?
Oh, Winnie the Pooh.
Winnie the Pooh. That was it. Winnie the Pooh. Yeah. Yep. That whole story sounded just like Winnie the Pooh carrying around his honey pot. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yep.
All right. Well, Amy has more serious things to discuss.
Well, kind of. I mean, when we think about it, and I even heard Simon just a little bit say hobbies with a little question mark in his voice. I think in other places we might call them something else. What is a hobby? What is a hobbyist? And so we're going to do kind of a lightning round of defining terms, because as our listener audience is very wide in their tastes, maybe some people understand what you mean when you say hobbies and leisures, and maybe other people have a different idea. So what I'd love for you to do, doesn't matter who takes the word, help us understand and have a level playing field. What does that mean? Hobby or hobbyist? Either one of you, take a shot at it.
Actually, I'll take a little bit of that because it really applies in my business a lot. We're a commercial beekeeper, and so we supply commercial grocery stores and the big box stores, as well as the local farmers. In our industry, anything, like if you've got 10 colonies, you're a hobbyist. If you've got 300 colonies, you're a sideliner. And then when you go over 500, you're commercial. So for us, it's already broken down. But in what we do is we teach classes. We can seat 100 people in our venue, and we teach them the certified level beekeeping class, and then we pass them along to the state for the journeyman level, the master level. And so, the hobbyists are the people that we're starting off, and that they maintain a few colonies in the backyard. They don't live on it. See, all my income comes from honeybees.
Okay. All right. How about you, Simon?
Gosh, well, it's a little different because being in the bird business, hobbyists are anyone who puts up a bird feeder in the back garden, to somebody who goes trekking across Nepal in search of some rare pheasant. So you've got all extremes, and it's hard to really pin it down, but to say that it's hard to appeal to all those people in one capsule, but we've managed to, in what we're offering in the way that Kerry said, is to appeal to people who are brand new beginners and people who have an awful lot of expertise. And it's hard to know where amateurism stops and professionalism starts, because it's
starts with the bank account in my business, for sure.
I mean, I can,
because you can spend a lot of money. It's like playing golf.
Yeah.
For your hobby, you spend a lot of money starting the hobby, and if you can't sell a couple of quarts to get your money back, you start to get discouraged and quit, and that's what we don't want them to do.
Nope. Exactly.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh,
well, that's absolutely fine. No. It's what was I going? I'm sort of lost my chain of thought a little bit there, but
well, you were talking about how it is difficult to make that distinction between the hobbyist and the professional.
Yeah, I mean, I'm self-taught. I'm not a professional ornithologist. I did not go to college for an ornithological degree, even though I thought about it at one stage, and I looked at the curriculum and I went, I could teach this. What's the point of me taking this degree? I'm self-employed, and I'd stick an extra $10 bill on my paycheck. So I thought that was rather a waste of time. But what we
and
try,
I'm not a master beekeeper either, but I am the largest one in the state. I'm 277 pounds.
You got me. But I'm just excited when people start a hobby, whether it's stamp collecting or looking at birds. You don't have to be extreme. Yes, I've been doing this since I was 8. When my parents gave me a pair of binoculars when we lived in Ghana, and they would say, we didn't have television, we didn't have internet, we had nothing. So I would just take the binoculars and go outside and wander and look at birds. And my parents would say, just appear in time for dinner, or don't go out of earshot. Well, we were gone usually. And we survived, most of our excursions out into the wilderness. But it's just exciting to see people start, and even if it's just watching something small in your back garden as a complete amateur. I'm lucky to get paid now to do what I've always loved doing, which what's nice is I still, on my day off, if there is such a thing anymore, is to go out and I'll take a hike and I'll go birding by myself. I won't necessarily be not the word enthusiastic. I won't be as sort of outgoing as necessary if I'm with other people, but I just enjoy going out. I guess it's just refining all of those and honing all of your techniques. So hearing is vital, seeing is vital, and knowing what you expect in a certain spot is vital. So there's a lot of little clues and a lot of little shortcuts, but most of the time it's being a keen observer. In any situation
of the trade.
Yeah, I love that, and that's why we really wanted to kick off this part of our season with Wonder and Observation, talking to you two about the birds and the bees, literally, because you're both talking about this idea of finding joy in something and taking small steps into that. And so let's talk about this word leisure, because when I was in college, I had to take a class on teaching leisure skills to special needs children. Like, how would you help someone learn leisure skills? Because again, you don't grow up on the side of the mountain in North Carolina or in Ghana. How do you begin this? So what do you think about when you think about the word leisure?
Do you have a hobby?
Okay.
I discovered actually, as I go through life, that a lot of people, whether they know it or not, I call it leisure, of course. Leisure activity could be anything from hiking to walking to birding to playing golf, playing tennis, whatever. But I find that a lot of people don't seem to have hobbies, and that I'm not quite sure why that. I mean, there's so many interesting things out there. Why not let something have a spark? And that spark is what makes you follow it.
Creativity. I've had, I make kombucha. I have bonsai trees. My life is full of hobbies. And a couple of them actually have afforded me the opportunity to live a good life with, the income I needed to survive. The first thing right out of college, I went into the radio business because I liked music. It was a hobby. And so I played a little guitar and a little bass, wasn't good at any of it. But before it was over with, I made a living for 15 years in radio. And then when I lost that job, what did I do? I fell back on my hobbies. And I started gardening again because I said, well, I know I can sell produce because no one grows produce anymore. And so I started that. But honeybees was part of the whole sustainable farm plan for me. But I found out really quick that the honey sold faster than anything and it didn't perish. And so I started focusing on non-perishable. And so I just kept growing with the honeybees. And so I turned that into a business that's made income too. But I still have hobbies. I have a little distillery. I have we just play with, we make creamed honey, flavored honey. We have a little kitchen to where we try all different kinds of products just for fun to see if they work. We make our own candles in the store. So we're literally, hobbies is what I'm all about.
Mm.
It all merges together, doesn't it?
It does.
Creativity, enthusiasm.
Mm-hmm.
It just all becomes one, and you just pick and choose. But no, I think if you're interested in one thing, you can often be interested in so many things.
Lovely. Oh, this was so good. And you've hit on so many different nuances of creativity and wonder and observation. So Holland, lead us into some questions. What can we do to spark up this conversation?
Simon, research says that last year, when we were all stuck at home, birding went up 45%. Why is the trend moving in that direction? I mean, what is it that's sort of pulling people to watch birds?
Well, I've read a little bit of some of the data, and I thought it actually in some areas had gone up even more. So, which is exciting. And I think the bottom line is, hey, you're stuck at home. There's only so much television you can watch before you go completely nuts. And you look outside the window, and I have friends, and I've said to them, I'm sure they say, they talk to me and they say, you've seen no birds, and what birds have you seen? And I'll reverse the question and I'll ask them, non-birding people. And it's surprising. They'll say, oh yes, I saw an osprey, or I've seen a hummingbird. It may not be earth-shattering, but people notice things. And I think the whole being stuck at home, having to find something else to do has created a massive interest in what's around you, which is only for the better. About 15 years ago, I went to Australia, and the first thing I saw when I left the Melbourne airport was some kids on ATVs chasing kangaroos, and I was disgusted. The last time I went, and nobody was paying any attention to wildlife. The last time I went camping with friends. Everyone had wildlife books and binoculars, and I was just shocked at how the appreciation and respect for wildlife has grown. And that's just in one place. And I think it's happened. I mean, my business, since the pandemic sort of leveled off, we are so busy, we don't even know what to do. We just can't even think straight. We're looking for leaders. We're trying to find more trips. They fill faster than we know what we can do with. And it's all to do with people have suddenly realized, there's more to life than maybe watching TV or doing this, and get out and see life. We had a deer and some fawns in the garden today. Yes, they eat my vegetables. I put up with it. It's so wonderful to watch them. And our groundhog that's eaten all my parsley down to the ground. I looked at it today, and it's got a bad back leg, and so I'm going to sacrifice my parsley to the groundhog. But I think it's just a newfound respect for nature, and I think people are finding out more and more of what's about them outside.
It's interesting when you put it that way. I hadn't thought about it like that. If someone said to me, have you ever done birding? I would say no. I've never so much as picked up a pair of binoculars and looked at a bird. I don't know anything about birds. And yet, I used to live right across the street from an old abandoned grist mill. Of course, there was a creek that ran through there, and we had a crane that lived, I guess it lived in or near the mill, because we'd frequently see it out in the stream padding around fishing.
That would be a great blue heron, but that's a common name for them is around here is cranes. But,
okay. So I would watch that one, and we had a beaver for a while that lived over there until he died under suspicious circumstances after he built a dam that backed up the water. The homeowners association complained about it, and the county sided with the beaver, but he was found dead after that, so we were never really sure what happened. But like you say, you can still watch wildlife even if that's not your hobby, right?
Yeah.
Well, watching the honeybees is what got me. So how many of you've seen a swarm of bees out in nature? Any of you? You've seen that out in nature before? Okay, so I started beekeeping as a hobby. Ernie, who's actually downstairs on the porch right now, gave me my very first beehive over 25 years ago. And so I thought, well, I'm going to be a beekeeper, and went out there to go in, and they ate me up. And I ran to the house to get in, and the wife just closed the door. She wouldn't let me in. And so I started looking for a mentor that had honeybees to help me learn. And so I hung out with him for a long time. And then I found another mentor that had more bees. And then before it was over with, I was working with a commercial beekeeper. And then I ended up working at Clemson University under Dr. Hood with the bee program there, and did some research with Keith Delplane out of Georgia. And so we try really hard. Our problem, we all have problems, I'm assuming. Our problem in our industry is we try to bring new people in and teach them the basics so that they'll know, does beekeeping really suit you or not? Because you have to take care of them like you do any other pet, honestly, because of they won't live in nature anymore because of the varroa mite. And we have small hive beetles, tracheal mites, varroa mites. And so it's really hard to keep honeybees alive if you don't watch after them closely. And then you have fungicides and pesticides, insecticides, that affect us also. Mm-hmm. And so we try to, when we do help people come in as a hobby, we also try to hook them up with a mentor that'll make sure that they're successful with their hobby the best we can.
I just love that whole idea of sustainability. You were talking about why you liked to work with honey is it keeps, it's something that continues. But there is some statistics that are a little bit scary. There's a 6% drop in honey production, 4% fewer colonies are producing honey. You've mentioned a few of them, Kerry. What do you think is the greatest threat to bees right now?
Well, it's been this way for a long time. I've been in it 25 years. My dad didn't have that problem. My grandfather didn't have that problem either. And so over the years, the American foul brood came in and wiped out the bees here. And so now basically the bees in the United States is European bees. And so, but along with that, we also got the varroa mite, the tracheal mite, and some of those things that also affect the bees. But nutrition would be number one on my list. We try to keep our bees in the woods now. We go into the woods. We deal with the bears, but, just being out in the public, there's too many people, putting stuff on golf courses and the front yard and, things, water runoff into the streams, the bees land on the sand and drink. So, it's tough, but if they want to be successful, they have to educate themselves. It can be done, but you have to find a friend.
Yeah. Yeah. I really appreciate that. That's excellent. So do you have a solution to some of those threats?
Well, yeah. Some organic, some not. So you have to determine what kind of beekeeper you're going to be. because there's, a lot more effort goes into the organic way. The chemical way solves the problems quicker. And then one year in 2015, I had like 350 colonies to die, and that was a lot. And I just almost just threw in the towel. I was pretty much done, because that's very depressing for you to work all year and then go out there and 350 of them die. And you go every 10 days. They were alive 10 days before, so it gets really stressful. And so we started just thinking about, okay, when I was a small beekeeper, what did I do? And so I had this kind of bottom board, this kind of beehive. I didn't have bees on pallets. I started thinking about, every little thing. What am I doing different now that I'm a big beekeeper? And I went back to doing things the way I did when I was a small beekeeper. And it started going down. The next year we had, I think, 175 or so die. The year after that, it was like 75. And so I think just not letting the wheels fly off the bus, slow down a little bit, back up, and try to determine what happened and just see if you can fix it. In one case, it was I didn't know that you were not supposed to feed bees brown sugar. And we have a wax melter, and you melt the wax, and the residue honey kind of gets cooked. And I was thinking, well, that's sweet. I add water to it, and I feed the bees. Every time I'd go back, there'd be a few less bees. Every time I'd feed them, there'd be a few less bees. Well, I finally figured out I was killing the bees, and talked to a friend down in Florida, Mr. Mixa, and I said, I don't know what I did. And he started asking me questions, and he said, you can't feed bees scorched honey. There's too much solids in it, and it messes up their digestive system. And so it's those little mistakes that you make sometimes. I think you sometimes are the worst in it.
Mm. Okay.
Enthusiastic about something, you're going to make mistakes. It's just a matter of time and course.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
So we try to give back with the education, the tours that we do with the school kids. We try to educate as many people as I can about how to keep them alive and do it the right way.
Mm.
Then they won't have to make all the mistakes I did.
I love that. Thank you so much.
So not everyone can carve out the time for leisure. What do you recommend people do if they just want to take some steps toward a new hobby, or maybe they have a limited window of time in which they want to pursue this hobby? Are some hobbies, better suited for different seasons of life?
Oh gosh,
Yes.
Yeah. Well, yes. More time.
I'll go climb the mountain behind Simon when I was 20-something, and now I go get on the boat and ride around the lake and look at the mountains.
If you've only got a limited amount of time, let's say you're working and you have children at home or something like that, it's usually, well, I say this, I've never had children of my own to deal with, so, but to carve a little bit of time for yourself is physically good for you mentally as well. But the neat thing about any hobby, and of course I'll talk about my own hobby, which is birding, which it used to be called bird watching. Now it's birding. It's a sort of grown up a little bit. It's a little bit more, maybe a bit more accepted and maybe less geeky. But it's funny. back in England when I was spending time, spent some time growing up there. Most of the birders were young men. It was very much a young men's active hobby. And it was competitive, very competitive. And that side of things can turn people off. But if you also just treat it as a way to get out, and it really adds a little bit more to a walk in the woods. So if you take a walk in the woods or a walk down a trail or a walk into your local park, whether you've got 5 minutes or 5 hours, looking around at what's around you really it can ground you. It can really just help your mental state. And look at, because birds and wildlife, most of the time, they don't take much notice of humans. We're there as a sort of an inconvenience and something that really probably just gets in their way. So if I walk in the park and there's a pair of robins messing around on the lawn, yes, they're enjoying getting worms out because we've created the lawn, but whether we're there or not, they'd rather probably we weren't. But just watching them, really, it can take your mind off feeding children or emptying cat boxes, whatever else you're doing at home. And it may just give you a little bit more of an attitude on life that sort of takes you out of your own little box a little bit.
And in my world, it would be just not to overload yourself with too much work, because it's very exciting to start this new hobby.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so exciting that you want more of them. And before you know it, you have so many beehives that you can't maintain them properly.
Mm-hmm.
And so we try to encourage people to take it step by step. There's things you need to learn. But the other side of that is that, we were talking about the schooling, the education that goes along with it. I tried in the beginning to just use my country boy words to explain beekeeping so that they understand that, we're keeping these bees like a pet, but this is their normal way that they live inside of a tree. And, we're trying to recreate that for them, which is actually better than a tree for them. It's healthier the way that we do it. And so it should be better for the bees, but we just try to not overload people with too much information. We try to explain it in layman's terms.
Yeah, we all have our own languages.
Yeah.
And we can say things that people just look at you and they'll sort of glaze over and they say, what are you talking about?
Yeah, you can go over their head real quick and they get discouraged. And I want grandpa and grandson to be able to come and both of them leave feeling like they had a good experience. I don't want either one of them to leave feeling like we talked above them.
Absolutely. That's a nice attitude. I like that. But it's so true, because when you've been doing something for a long time like you've been and I've been, it's very easy to say, oh, I'm talking about going birding in South Africa and then I'm in Panama, and people go look at me and go, do you ever stay at home? And sometimes, no, I don't. But it's not that if I didn't get paid to go to Australia or Peru or wherever else X number of times a year, I certainly couldn't afford it by myself. But to have the ability and to get paid to do that, sometimes I have to sort of step back and go, you know what? For some people, that is a dream trip. And I've been there 10 times. I have to sort of back off a little bit and realize that, heck, I'm luckier than a huge number of people to be able to do this. And I'm still enthusiastic about it. The gloss hasn't worn off. And if you were to give me an air ticket tomorrow, wherever, I'd take it. It wouldn't matter. And I would still happily teach and show people wildlife and birds wherever.
These are so good. I just really appreciate the attitude that you bring to this whole idea of hobbies and leisure or leisure. So as we wrap up this first episode, part 1, Kerry, what is an essential element we need to understand about hobbies and leisure activities? Boil it down.
Well, I have a lot of hobbies, but to me, the hobby that you do, you should just get enjoyment from it. It should make you happy. You should be able to share it with friends, whether it's painting or making beer or pouring candles. We grow mushrooms. Who knew? I mean, we try anything. It's just a blast. Doesn't mean that we're going to try to turn it into a business or anything. It means we're just having fun, trying new hobbies. And so I guess just have fun with it.
I love that. And be able to share it with friends. That's great.
That's right.
Awesome. How about you, Simon? What's an essential element we need?
Sense of enthusiasm and inquisitiveness.
Mm.
And this year I planted what I considered was my best vegetable patch garden ever. I have rows of everything. And then I left town for a month. So I shared that with everybody. But I was so enthusiastic about growing everything because I love growing things. Well, thankfully, when I came back, I managed to find some of the tomatoes are doing beautifully, and I'm unearthing them from the weeds. But I think the bears have had fun, the deer have had fun, and so some friends of mine have come and enjoyed it. But yeah, maybe next year. And then, of course, I'm leaving town again for another month, so maybe I'll learn. Maybe I won't. I'll still get enthusiastic.
And continually grow that hobby too. That's once you start a hobby, you don't have to be an expert at it. I made a lot of mistakes this year. I moved into a subdivision. Never lived in a subdivision, but I still had to have my garden. And so I learned a lot about a garden in a subdivision, urban gardening, basically. But I did good with tomatoes too, by the way. Actually canned a few, which was another hobby.
Yes. My mother's a big cook back in England, and she makes all these chutneys and marmalades and relishes. Mm-hmm. You know what? There's nothing nicer than going, because we used to do picnics for all our trips, going and bringing homemade chutneys and preserves and pickles and putting them on the table, and people they just appreciate it so much. And we
share it with friends. Yep.
Doing it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This is just delightful. And I'm so glad we get to share this next episode, part 2, in just a few minutes. So Holland, close us out.
Well, I'd just like to say thanks to Simon and Kerry, because the conversation really has me thinking about leisure and hobbies and the importance of sharing those things with friends. So while you wait for part 2, please go to theafterwordpodcast.com and become a subscriber. You can leave us a review and tell your friends about us. And as always, you are welcome at our table.